Hello, everybody. Oops, I just scratched my microphone, so I'm sorry if that was loud. But hello, everybody. Welcome to Mom Your Own Way podcast. I'm Lily Coco. We're talking about all things mom, and today I'm super excited. We're talking to Erin Conley. She's a mom, a blogger, and she was a mom of 4, but about to be a mom of 6. She's almost due with twins, so let's just dive on in and get to know her. Hi, Erin.
Hi, how are you?
I'm so good. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you.
I'm excited to be here.
First of all, let's talk about that barn door behind you because your husband did make that, and I'm stoked.
He did.
Yeah.
Yes, he did. He's pretty, other side there. He's pretty handy. And so it just slides over and kind of closes off our master bath, which I love.
Yes.
We've
I love
been
it.
in our house for 9 years, 9 years. And so we've been slowly making things our own. And I would love to bring the old owners in and be like, hey, check it
This
out.
is what we
They
did.
would not recognize one bit of it, I don't think.
Really? I'm glad that you're making it your own, especially with your family. It becomes your own castle. It's not just like a regular home that you got and you know, it's just so yours.
Yes. It's very much like all the things that we love.
I love that. Okay, so mom of 4.
Yes.
Blogger, kind of a historian, and about to be mom of 6.
I am. And I smirked a little at the blogger. It's funny. I was a teacher for 10 years.
Okay.
And when we used to live in Colorado, and I blogged often. I mean, and it was more of a way to share with my family. We lived in Denver, Colorado, outside of Denver, and but I'm from outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and so that was my way of keeping in touch with my family, just to let them see what was going on, and I'd tell stories and all of that. And then as I've gotten older in my parenting, like, oh, I haven't written as much as I should, and I think it's just the way that things have changed. I share things more on Instagram through captions, photos, things like that, but I guess the mommy blog phase is over. And so it's just a different way of sharing.
But it's so cool because it's such a part of you and you can always look back. You have those things written and then your kids have access to it. So they can always go back. They can read those stories. They can remember the memories that you had with them. So it's not even about continuing it or coming back to it, but like just having it in your pocket of like, it's a scrapbook. It's a scrapbook of your guys' life.
That's really why. I mean, I said like, I shared to my family, but it's really for my kids. I'm a huge storyteller and just love to see things, lessons that I've learned. And I'm pretty open about most everything that we're going through, because I feel like there's such a stigma at times about, concealing the hard stuff and making sure it looks a certain way.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, life is not the Instagram squares and the perfect little image. So
it's so silly because the social media has kind of shaped us into this really quick, instant snapshot of what someone's life is. And we all know that that's not the truth, like we set it up, we gonna edit it, we write a thing. But we still, even though we know that's not the full truth, we still go on thinking that represents the person.
Oh, yeah.
And there is this whole idea of like making it look like you're having the best life, like you're just killing it, And I don't know. I feel like that I usually connect more to the stories that I see myself in when it's something is broken, something didn't go the way I thought it would be, which is very common in my life where I think I have a plan and I think I have it figured out. And then of course God says, let me tell you that you don't have it figured out and you don't have it in the lockdown. So just stop fooling yourself, girlfriend.
Yes. I think that recently, probably the last half of from about 2019 on, but really the last half of 2021 even, my father passed away from cancer in 2021. My mother-in-law passed away from cancer in 2019. And so our family's just gone through a lot of loss and a lot of shifting. And, I've wavered up and down in all of my faith in the midst of that. And recently, I guess when I was going through the loss of my dad, the verse that kind of just kept popping up was that Romans 8:28 and how he's working everything for our good. And so I realized that so much in being a mom with my kids, because So I have one son who is about to be 16 a little bit later on this year. I'm actually looking forward to him driving because I have a whole bunch of other kids that need places to go.
Yeah, you gotta have your own personal Uber. Yes. Send all the kids with him. All right.
I call myself a moober. Okay. Yeah, but then I have a 13-year-old daughter, 10-year-old daughter, 4-year-old daughter, who's turning 5 very soon. And then, yes, we have 2 twins on the way.
So soon, right?
Yes, just about 5 weeks.
Wow.
5 weeks. And we are waiting until they're born to know their genders.
Oh, yeah. What do you have an idea? Do you have any family bets? No. Okay.
Well, so a family bet, it's not even a family bet. My 4-year-old has determined that they're a boy and a girl, refuses to accept any other reality that they could potentially be 2 boys or 2 girls. Okay. And she has decided to name them Little Flag and Little Strawberry. I can confirm those are not the names. But I don't know where she came up with that, but the night that
I'm sorry, those are the
I know.
How can you not name him that now?
4-year-olds are she's probably one of my favorite ages. But yeah, so we're just waiting. So and it'll be interesting this time around. We waited with our gender reveal until birth for our 4-year-old. Okay. But the kids were able to come to the hospital and meet her. And now because of COVID, they won't. And so my teenagers have said, we're not meeting the babies over FaceTime. Like, we want to meet them face to face. We want to find out who they are face to face. And so it will be hard for them to know that they're here on this earth, like doing well and then not knowing name or gender or anything.
Yeah.
Them face to face, so.
You could do the Simba moment out of the hospital and just
da-da. Yeah, it is what it is. We're making the best of it. I've already prepared some of my family, hey, by the way, you're going to find out not on their actual birthday. Yeah. You have to wait till the kids find out.
It's rough. I had to give birth through COVID, and I think that was one of the hardest things was to tell my mom that she wasn't going to be there. And she's like, what do you mean I can't be there? And I was like, well, Mom, it's COVID. And she's like, they don't let anybody in. I was like, well, they let you have one person, and that's going to be my husband. Obviously, and it of course makes sense to everybody, but I feel like to my mom, it was this punch to the throat that I was like, it's going to be someone else but you. And so I feel bad about that. I mean, it just sucks. It just sucks.
It does. And I've told my kids, I'm like, we can grieve it for a short while, but we don't want to stay there. Yeah. Because in the long term, they're here, and we get to, and they're actually rainbow twins. I lost a pregnancy towards the end of 2020.
I'm sorry.
And so, it's a little strange this time around.
You really did go through a lot of grievances in a big chunk of time. That's a lot for a person to go through, and it's all family and really close and really important. I'm really sorry.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I think honestly, and I write a lot about it just as a way of coping, but I think that it's helped grow our family, the core of us, 6, soon to be 8 of us, really, really close, and
such a big family.
Just changed us in a lot of ways, a lot of really good ways. So
yeah, I love that. Oh, here's my question about the twins. So I'm guessing people who don't know the gender pick out 2 sets of names when. So then, do you have?
Well, we have a set for boy, and we have a set for girl, and we have a set for boy and girl.
So 3 sets.
Yeah, but I won't reveal anything.
No.
Yeah. All my kids know. So my 13-year-old daughter is just insistent that we tell them, but she also they want to know. I feel like we all want to know, but then Men in Black, the little right over your face, so you forget.
Yeah.
But my kids' names are Gavin, Bryn, Reagan, and Jameson.
Great names.
They all thank you. They all end with that N sound, and so they know that will be it. And they also know that they're kind of more on the not as common. We don't typically find our kids' names on the top 100, or if they're looking for their name at on a seashell at the beach or something, they're not going to find it.
I'm so interested. I want to throw names out, but then we're just going to go in a whole different area with that.
Oh, don't worry. My 13-year-old sat and read a list of names and just tried to look at my face and see if I gave any tells. And I was just like,
smart.
Yeah.
Smart. Well, okay. This is very exciting. I want to talk about, you said you were have been a mom for 15 years, right?
Yes. Yep. My son turns 16 in a couple of months.
Tell me all about your motherhood journey. Tell me about your story. Let me into your life.
Well, my husband and I got married in 2005. Mm-hmm. And about 2 or 3 days after we got back from our honeymoon, we moved from the Philadelphia area, Pennsylvania, across the country to Denver by ourselves. Wow. And for his job. And so that was crazy. Not at all something that my family did. Like, my family stayed very close together and, like in the local area. Mm. And so then I became a teacher. I was already a teacher, but I got a job out there and taught for about 8 years before we moved down back.
What were you teaching?
I taught mostly 4th grade, but I also taught a year in 2nd and 2 years in 3rd. Wow. So a lot.
And a lot of kids.
A lot. And it's hard. I'll tell you, being a teacher and naming children is a really.
Oh my gosh. I didn't even think about that. Honestly, it's so hard. But if you know.
Well, we wound up getting pregnant with Gavin pretty quickly. Like, my husband had said, we don't talk to us or, don't ask us about kids for 5 years. And I was nursing a 6-week-old at our first anniversary dinner. So like you were saying earlier, God's just like,
yeah, God's funny like that. Right. Yeah. I think God is one of the biggest comics in the world.
Oh yeah. He's so many hold my beer moments in our family.
Oh my, and he just watches it, like he's just having the best time just watching it. Like, what a reality TV show he's enjoying of all of these different lives and all the stuff that he's like, let me add a little more drama. It's like the Truman Show. And he's like, we need a little more romance. We need a little more drama. We need a little more tear, and like.
And all of it is to just refine us, right? I mean, every bit of it.
Because we grow so much. Like, it sucks. It sucks seeing what comes at your face because you're like, why is this train about to hit me? What did I do? And then you come to the other side and you're like, oh, man. That's exactly what I needed and I hate it. But God got it right.
It's definitely been, I think that now that I turned 40 last year, and just in the last couple of years, like, realizing that, especially after all the loss that we went through, when you realize that you just have, I'm like, okay, I don't know. My friends would ask me how I got through all of the loss that we've been through, and I'm like,
you just do it.
How to release, I'm doing this, but you just have to release it. So, but so we had Gavin fairly early, and then we decided to have another one. We tried to do a little planning, and thankfully it worked well. Bryn and Gavin are just about 2 years apart. And then my husband was like, we have a boy, we have a girl, we're done. And I was like, I don't think so.
Have you always wanted a bigger family?
Well, I'm one of I have 2 younger brothers, and knowing that we were living in Colorado at the time, and my husband is in oil and gas, and I knew that we're not going back to the Northeast. I knew that we would just I wanted that group of lots of people around, years down the
that holiday party of everyone. I love that.
You were talking about that last Friday with your guests, and I was like, yes, I remember thinking that.
Wow, that's so silly. Wow, what a.
So we had Reagan. She's our third. She's a firecracker. She's sitting out right on my view, out the window right here. Aww. On a swing, because she knows I'm doing something and she needs attention. And so shortly after she turned 1, my husband and I were starting to realize that with his position on the oil rigs, just on call, never really home. I remember one Christmas him calling, driving. He's like, I'm home as fast as I can, and I'm holding the kids upstairs so that they don't go down and see all their Santa Claus, presents. And he was driving so fast because he'd been working on a rig at night and wanted to get home just to enjoy the magic of Christmas. And we were like, this isn't conducive to family life. This schedule is really hard. Yeah. I was teaching full time. And so he started looking. And when, I guess at the end of 2012, he got a position down here outside of Houston. And so we packed up, and I was like, who am I? Who am I moving across the country like this?
Who's this nomad?
Yes. And so we've been here since the end of 2012. And now we're at the point where we've tipped the scales to more time in Houston than outside of Denver. obviously we've added to our family with Jameson, and we're adding, a couple of weeks. And I just feel like the roots that we have put down here have just, like, it's just grown us so much. In fact, the person who connected us, Savannah, who connected us, I met her through our church that we joined. Yay! And I tell so many people here that literally my life, everyone I know outside of maybe some of my kids' teachers and, classmates, and moms through their, you become so-and-so's mom. Yeah. And your kids go to school. Every other person I've met you can trace the roots back, like 6 degrees of separation back to the church that we joined.
So much.
Yeah.
That's so important. Yeah. You know what's so silly? I'm just starting to understand the importance of family. I had to move a lot, uproot a lot, move things, different stuff kind of went on. And for me, I was kind of always surprised that people kind of stay in the same town, where I was like, oh, I need to go and do all these things. And later did I find out I was actually running away from stuff. Yeah. But once we moved to Tennessee, my mother-in-law moved over here too. My parents did as well. But my mother-in-law is such a great help. Like right now when I do my podcast, she's the one that watches the baby. Sometimes my husband does too. But she loves kids. She grew up, like she used to teach kids. And she's just in love with their baby. But I'm like, I understand family and being close because these things. And now I'm kind of far away, so I don't have mom friends around. Yeah. So my baby doesn't have like kid friends yet. And I'm like, man, I understand of now being somewhere and staying there because you treat this like town that you're in like your home. Like there's renovations, you meet these other people, but you take care of it, and it's your tribe, it's your community, it's your village that you can reach out and help. And then different moms are having different babies, so you're like, oh, do you need a crib? I have a crib. Do you need this? And it's this community, and it's so beautiful. And I'm just like, unfortunately, just now stepping into it, seeing like, oh, this is the importance of it. Like I understood it, but this is now actually facing your own, like, I really, really get it.
Yes. And I think that it's so, what I love about you sharing that is that you said your little one's just one, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think I realized that until much later. I know I didn't realize it until much later. And it's not to say that we didn't have an amazing community of people when we lived in Colorado. We did. It just looked different.
Yeah.
We didn't have like that home church feel. And like I said, my husband's schedule was crazy, and I worked a lot, and, I was in the throes of physical parenting. When you have them that little and that close together, it's physically demanding.
Yeah.
And then now I'm shifting into that mental, but also physical, because I still have little ones. You realize how much of life is dependent upon other people, and the community piece is huge. And I'm telling you, like the outpouring of love and support and things that we have received in that time frame when we've had all that loss, and now even expecting the twins, it's kind of mind-boggling. My mom visited recently for Thanksgiving, and she just couldn't get over, like, she goes, well, what do you need for the twins? I'm like, well, Mom, we already have a stroller. We already have a car seats. We already like, everyone's just giving us things that they're no longer using. And where I grew up, that wasn't really like a super common practice, I guess, in like, at least in the area, like the community that I was a part of.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of, it feels a little overwhelming at first, but then you realize, like, I won't always be in this season of need where you need to bring me a meal because I like just have babies or whatever. Eventually I'll be able to give it back in other ways. And we all rely on each other. And I think that that's been so huge in helping with my parenting, helping with my marriage, recognizing, we all learn from each other in so many different ways. And especially with my kids, just getting them to see the value of what they have to offer and how they can help someone, even in the smallest way.
Yeah.
Even just with like advice or just being there in a way.
Just sitting next to somebody. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's kind of gathering. Two of my biggest lessons so far I've been through motherhood is, it's so silly because I love giving help. I love helping. I'm like, I would rather not do anything for myself. I'd rather help somebody, but I struggle with accepting help. Yes. I pretend that I'm comfortable with it, but if I'm being really honest, I really struggle with it, because when somebody says, let me help, I'm like, I'm already doing it. I can do it later. I can, whatever. And so this has been one of those things where I'm like, God is introducing me to humble down and to say, yes, I need help. And yes, I accept help.
Yes. I think the biggest time frame when I learned that recently is when my husband's mom went through her cancer battle. She was diagnosed at the end of summer in 2019, and she lived outside of Pittsburgh. And so we, living outside of Houston with access to MD Anderson, we were like, come down here. Like, we're moving you down here. She was a widow. And so we moved her in with us. And she only lived with us for 77 days before she passed away. It was very aggressive. But in that time period, and in the weeks and the months after, I remember one night my son, he was a teenage boy. He goes, Mom, I know that the people bringing us food are awesome, but when are you cooking again? Like, he really just missed my food. I don't think that I cooked a meal for 2.5, 3 months, just because I had this group of moms, mostly from my Moms of Preschoolers group, my MOPS group, but many people from my church, just neighbors, friends, people, right, who they set up a meal train and just food just showed up. Wow. And I'm like, I don't even remember how to cook. Once we kind of were coming out of that, I'm like, okay, so I had to get the timing of everything right so that we were eating it, the functional hour. Yeah. But it was just kind of amazing. And being not around family, blood family and family tree family, that was a humbling, hard thing to reconcile with, but I legitimately had no time. I was raising a toddler, getting 3 kids off to school, trying to be, a present person for my husband, losing his mom, and taking care of her full time in my house. And so I was like, I don't have the capacity to even say, oh no, I've got this, and pretend. I had to just humble myself and have some hard conversations with myself, with God, and even with my kids. Listen, I know that you don't like this, but Mommy can't cook tonight, and so we're going to eat it. One of those things, and explain to them the value of being able to, like I said earlier, accept help and
accepting. That's so valuable to teach. And I want to, now that we're talking about it, a note I want to make in my head to make sure because I always want to be like, oh, I want to teach her how to be helpful and how to offer help, and and then I'm like, I also need to make sure that I teach her how to accept help. I was laughing this morning because my husband constantly wants to help me, and I, like I said, want to do things on my own. And we're just now having those conversations where, how do we communicate through this where he can actually help me and it flows. And in the morning, I was feeding her some chia, and she wanted to get it from the jar, but I knew it wasn't going to work. And so I say, can Mommy help? Let Mommy help. Let Mommy help you. And she takes it away, and she wants to do it on her own. And it clicked into my head. I'm like, God is laughing right now, because that's exactly what my husband is trying to do to me. My husband is just saying, honey, let me help. Let me just help. I'll just do it, and you wouldn't even have to worry about it. But instead, I'm just fighting it like my 1-year-old. I'm taking the spoon saying, no, I can do this by my own. And it's so silly because you put those together and you're just like, oh my gosh, I'm doing the same thing.
Yes. I had the exact, well, not with chia, but my husband bought me one of those bullet ice makers.
Yes, okay.
Christmas, right?
Okay,
Okay. For an odd reason, I crave ice, especially when I'm pregnant, and I'm a big ice person. So we have one of these countertop things, and
my husband wants one so bad. He wants one so bad.
I will tell you, I'll have to give you the brand that we have is great, but it's a little noisy, and so we're trying to reconcile that. My husband with the door, he's going to figure out the way to fix it.
Put another barn door in front of the ice maker.
Put a barn door. But so the other day I have been telling the kids, you have to refill. It's not that big of a chore, but if you're taking ice, you need to make sure you put more water in so that we continue. 6 people,
so it's ready.
We go through a lot of ice.
Yeah.
My 10-year-old, who I've mentioned earlier, she's kind of her own adjective, does her own thing, loves to she would make a wonderful only child. And so being a part of 6 children is going to it's a challenge. And she spilled water like all over the counter. I'm like, yeah, I was frustrated. We were on our way out the door. It was just a giant mess, you know. And then later on that day, the kids were all in school. I came home. I was filling up the ice thing, and I overflowed it. And I'm like, and then she came home from school, and I had to sit her down, and I was like, okay, listen, here's the deal. So mom made the same mistake you did, only I didn't yell at myself the way I yelled at you. And I apologize to you for that, because I was totally wrong. And it was like, almost like God was one of those moments where he's looking down, laughing, going, yeah, okay, you overreacted about water, so I'm going to give you some water for yourself.
It's so silly when you can notice those things happening.
Yeah.
And sometimes I try to remind myself, like, if I don't notice this opportunity of learning that I'm supposed to go through and grow into right now, it's going to happen again.
Oh,
it's going to happen again, because God is trying to teach me. God is trying to help me grow. It's just, am I going to learn the lesson? Am I going to learn it this time, or going to need another time to learn this other lesson?
And I think that's where kind of my love of writing, my passion for writing, and like when I say blogger, I have several friends who are like, you are a writer. Even I haven't published anything. My husband.
It doesn't mean that you're not a writer.
My husband jokes, because I'm like on the computer that he purchased me, which is sitting on the desk that he purchased me, and he's like, okay, when are you going to write this book? Like I've had a lot of people tell me that, you need to write a book. And I think it's because the story that I just shared with you about the water overflowing, I take that and I turn it into a story like that I'll share. And that's a real life mom moment where I'm like, okay, here's what happened.
Yeah.
And here's the lesson that I learned from it. And here's where God showed up, or, here's where I ignored God showing up. And, it's just one of those like moments where I look back, I can reread what I've learned. I know I've had many people that have shared with me just, a little story that I've put out there that they're like, thank you so much for sharing that. But I also love it because what my initial goal in starting storytelling about my kids is for them, because I'm not going to always be here. And I want them to be able to look back on the words, and I want them to, I pray that they see that their mom was just continually trying, I'm like trying to get better. And I'm growing with them. And we all are, when we look back at our moms, I think, oh my gosh, my mom was just doing the best she could with what she had. And that's what we're doing. And we have a lot more resources now, the internet telling us to do it this way, do it that way.
Yeah.
But we're just trying to sift through and find what works the best. And, and figuring out also how to be a mom to different kids all along the way.
Yeah. Oh, that's something we talked about. I think we talked about it before we hopped on, so I want to make sure we talk about. You had mentioned that, because the term is usually like mom of 6, mom of 4, mom of 3, whatever. But you had mentioned that with every kid, you have to be a different mom. And so we started saying, not mom of 6, but 6 moms. You are 6 moms, because you have a separate relationship with everybody. And that not only that, you also have a relationship with your husband. Yeah. So you have to be almost 7 humans in one and do everything else, which is a lot.
I was actually, when you had your guest on Friday, she was kind of talking about that too. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've told people that a lot. And I mentioned to you before we went live, my 10-year-old was kind of the tipping point where I was like, oh, they're not going to be all like each other, even with the same recipe, right? My kids all look very similar. Everybody goes, oh, they're twins identical. They are fraternal. We know that. We don't know their genders. But I always joke, I'm like, they're Conleys. We know what they're going to look like. Like they're all 4 my kids. Their profiles are the same. I mean, it's very, very evident that they're siblings, which I love. But then their personalities are, just, my son is probably the closest cookie cutter version to my husband. And because he's the only boy and because he's the oldest, I see so many snippets of both of us in him, because I'm the oldest, but I'm not a boy. And so I don't know how to navigate that. But he's just this quiet, humble, like super low key, to the point where it's almost aggravating, because my husband's like that too. And I'm like, how are you not more upset about this? Like,
I'm ready more emotion.
Yeah. You know, and like when I'll text him something, I'll like give him a suggestion. Even this morning, he was heading to basketball, and I said, make sure you eat something so that you don't get a headache. Okay. And I'm like, okay.
Care
anyway.
that I care.
Yeah. But he has his tender moments, and he loves his mom fiercely. Like, I mean, he and I have this great connection. It's just, he doesn't talk as much as I do. My husband's like, you need to learn. Sometimes just the best things are just sitting next to him. He traveled a lot with my husband this summer. My son plays basketball. And so I'm like, did you have this conversation? He's like, no. I'm like, how uncomfortable is it just sitting there silently, you know? But that's how they connect, and that's fine.
Yeah.
My 13-year-old, I want to say she's a lot like me, but I don't know that she is. She probably is listening in on the other in the room and cringing. She's like, no, I'm not. She's the kind of kid that I wish I could have been at 13. Like, I've watched her and I'm like, how do you navigate preteen, teenagehood so well? She's so mature. Wow. And so I've learned a lot from her. She and I connect really, really well. We have our moments for sure, because, you know, everyone does. My 10-year-old though, actually Savannah and Bane, they have a special little connection with my Reagan. She's the one that she's that fireball. And so she's changed everything, and it's really hard to navigate that, because she's so much like me, but also the behavior, like the things that I'm like, you know, she brings out the worst in me, but also the best. And so I think in raising her and in recognizing over the past 10 years, the challenges that she's facing now in academics, it's, you know, and when she was littler, it was behavior. Now it's all academic stuff. That has taught my older two, myself, and now my current youngest, soon to be not current youngest, a lot of grace. And so I really think that, like, God was like, hey, you need a little wake up call here. And realize
He's good at that.
Yes. And so with Reagan, it's just realizing that we need to do things differently. And I think my biggest lesson for my older kids and me, and even my younger one, is fair is not where we like get everybody the same thing, doing it the same way. Fair is everybody getting what they need where they need it. And because, you know, she needs more attention. And so that's been a huge hurdle for us, but it's also been a huge lesson.
Yeah. I talked to another mom who had 4 kids, and something that we discussed was the discipline portion of multiple kids. And she also mentioned the word fair, because when her youngers were coming up to start getting disciplined for certain things, they would start saying the word, oh, well, that isn't fair. That isn't how you know. And she had to learn, because they are so different, they would need to use different discipline and different things. You use different words, lessons, timeouts, or not, whatever your discipline way is. But you have to sculpt it to the person, because, you know, taking a book away from one person means nothing, but taking a book away from another person means everything. So it's figuring out exactly what you said. What is fair? It doesn't mean, oh, everyone gets 30-minute timeout. It means you know, your consequences are fair to your event that will help you learn in this thing. And it's just talking to her, I was like, man, that would be one of the most difficult things to try to figure out is what is fair.
Yeah, and meeting their needs and meeting them where they're at. Yeah, definitely. When you said taking away things, like even when I was a teacher, and now I'm thinking back to like parent-teacher conferences, and I was a mom of littles, and these parents had more experience than me, and I vividly remember telling the parent, one parent, we need to figure out what their currency is. Like, what is valuable to them?
I like
for
that.
For my 10-year-old, it is screen time. So when you take that away from her, you know, that is a huge motivator. And not like attention. Like, I mean, of course we always give her attention, but I mean, we don't withhold hugs or anything like that. But if she wants that one-on-one time, we need to have that clear-cut expectation of, this is what we need from you, and then we can do this. My older two, their currency is very, very different. My son he used to put himself in timeout. Like, I remember him getting in trouble in preschool one time, or daycare one time.
Yeah.
And he put himself in timeout.
Wow.
So, finding their currency, finding what's valuable to them and important to them, it's like goes along with their love languages. My daughter's 10-year-old that's one of the things when I figured that out, and when I started to kind of look into what is it that is most necessary for them to thrive, and not using it in a manipulative way. No, we'd never take away, but
how to communicate with them. Yeah.
Yes. Because like you said, the timeout thing, if I send my 10-year-old up to her room for timeout, is that going to teach her anything? Like, she needs it for calming down, and then immediately go up and talk to her to get her to, get on level ground again.
I love that so much. I haven't put my time into it, but I want it. I'll probably do tonight. But really figuring out when it comes to love languages with children, because we spend so much time with adults, and how do we, it's our significant other or our friends, how do we talk to them, and how do we make them feel valuable?
Yes.
And so then you're taking that with kids, and then I just want to spend time to get to know, like, sometimes I'll struggle because my baby loves me so much, and so I'm like, girl, you are like obsessed, and I'm obsessed with her too. Yeah, of course. But she, we call it needy, but I'm like, maybe her love language is quality time, and so she just loves sitting next to me, and then I read her the same book over and over again. We point at the same stuff, and like, but she just loves it. She just loves spending that time with me, and so if that's what it is, I need to make sure I focus on that. Or, I just want to spend the time to get to know what is her love language, because I've seen how much it has helped me and my husband grow within that communication and understanding with one another. I want to utilize that knowledge with my child as well, because I mean it starts at the very beginning. You can see how babies are doing it. It's just getting yourself to like pay attention to that, to start deciphering what is it they're really needing, especially when they can't communicate. How do you really help them get the attention they need, get the love that they're craving, and
in a healthy way too, because there's so many ways, and just in raising my kids, like there's or in teenagers, you hear about all of them like acting out and things like that, and that's I try to remind myself, she's not giving me a hard time, she's having a hard time. And getting that expression, like teaching, advocating. And I love that you're starting that at such a young age with your daughter, and recognizing it, because I think as a mom, one of my biggest regrets, I think, is just not being as humble as I needed, being as open as I needed to be, being like this, like, and kind of thinking that it was going to go by some sort of like book. You mentioned, I think maybe before we went live, you were talking about a backpack, or maybe it was earlier in the podcast.
I use backpacks so much because we all carry these backpacks of different things. Absolutely.
And you just need that, like there's the backpack that we would truly need to get through all the things that we have coming down the pike. All the twists and turns, we would never be able to carry it. And so that's why I'm so glad that I'm just like, okay, God, it's yours. Like, and it's been, I don't want to say it's been easier, because momming is not easy. It has gotten much harder, navigating all these ages, all these needs. One wakes up at 5 or 6 in the morning, and then the teenagers are up till, on a non-school night, they're up till who knows when. Some nights I'm like, hey, I'll just tuck me in. I'm going to go. Don't raid the pantry. I'm going to bed. But my days are very long, and the needs that they all have are so vast, that it's just become, I want to say, more freeing to just be like, okay, I can't do it. I can't do it. I need help. And we were talking about asking for help earlier, and it's just like asking, like, okay, God, just help me be okay with my daughter wanting to get the chia seeds out by herself, or my kids horribly load the dishwasher, or, whatever it is.
But the dishes get clean. I'm trying to learn that right now, because I have a way of do things, and then I want everyone else to do my way. But then I'm like, what is the intention? That's what I want to start focusing on, is what is the intention? Okay, if the intention is to get the dishes clean, who cares how they get put into the dishwasher? They're gonna get clean, or I'm trying to use this asking for help with my daughter. Right now she hates changing diapers. She doesn't. She won't lay down. She won't do the thing. Even when I say diaper to pick her up to go, she already starts running. So now it's so silly. But like the last couple of days I've tried, because she likes to, when I ask her for things, if it's a book, I'm like, do you see the bunny? Do you see the cow? And we'll sit there for hours looking at books. So then I'm like, okay, how do I use that? And now I'm doing, where are your diapers?
Yes.
Where are your diapers? Can you show mommy? Now she's going in there to show me. So she's in charge, and I'm putting her in control of the situation. And our diaper changes have flipped.
And isn't it amazing how one little tweak in the way you word things, or the perspective that you have, it shifts so much, and it gives them ownership. Because I always joke, like my teenagers will tell me, oh, I can't, we're out of here. The oldest two are very, very, very close. They're like best friends. They rarely have moments where they're fighting, which I'm super grateful for, because there's plenty of that in the crew. But they'll always joke like, oh, we're just going to get our own apartment. And I'm like, you guys can't even, you can't do anything right. And it's all because it's my way. But teaching them the early on, like, what is the intention? If the intention is to get the dishes clean, or the diaper changed, or the clothes folded. I've told my kids, I'm like, I won't touch your laundry. I mean, I'll be nice every now and then, like I'll switch it over or whatever. But I'm like, if you need clean clothes, I taught you how to do that a while ago. Yeah. And that's on you. And it's not because I don't love you. My 10-year-old, you don't love me, and you're not doing my laundry. I'm like, actually, I love you, and I taught you how to do your laundry. And that's why I love you. Because if you need me to do it and I'm not around, I don't know what to tell you, sis.
That's, for me, I know for a fact that's going to be my biggest battle, because my love language is acts of service. So for me to do things for others, that's how I show love. And at the same time, that's how I see love. So like we're separate. My husband is quality time. So for him, he'd rather not do the dishes and just hang out, and we could live in a dirty home. But for him, it's so much more important. And for me, I'm like, why can't we get the dishes done and then sit, And so for me to receive that, for somebody whose love language is as acts of service is a love language, if that was your daughter's way of seeing things, I can see how she could also see, like, you don't love me because you didn't do it for me. Yeah. But I also know that if I constantly do things for my daughter, I'm disabling her. I'm not doing her a favor, because now she doesn't have the skills. She thinks that's what mom does, but that's not what mom does. Mom's job is to teach you how to do things, so then you can do it and teach your kids how to do it. And so I just know that's going to be my biggest struggle, is saying, you need, and I've been
giving that control over.
I've started doing it now, because she wants me to carry her here, carry her there, and I know she can get there herself. So I've started saying, like, well, you can do it. And as soon as I say it, she's like, oh, and she goes. It's not, I have it in my mind that I'm like, it's going to be a battle, she's not going to want it. But as soon as I introduce the idea, she's like, okay, like she's so game for it. So the obstacle really is in my own mind and in my heart that I'm battling and trying to get through. But like,
you're empowering her, though, in so many ways. And that is such a huge act of service, empowering the kids. I think teaching my Reagan, especially, she has dyslexia, ADHD, sensory processing. She's on the GT spectrum. She's like, basically, she stood in line, and when God was creating her, she stood in line for every little,
Okay, I'm so sorry. So like, I thought Reagan might be very much like me from things that you've said, because that's exactly how I was, exactly how I am. And what my mom always says is that when God was giving out, like, other things, I stood for the other stuff. Like, my mom uses that line, so I'm just like,
that's so funny. I seriously
blown away.
And I know that by just knowing, living life, and having friends that have children with way more significant special needs that need a lot more services and things, I know that it's not there's no comparison or anything. Like God's literally just giving you exactly the child that you need, right? And I have a friend who recently told me she was made for you, and I'm like, oh, that's so, like, that was the sweetest thing to say. Like, she really was, but I don't think I'm doing it right.
But it's so hard to see that. I think like I can often give the best advice to anybody, but when it comes to my own situation, I struggle taking it. And so that's where we struggle, is looking in the mirror and seeing like, oh, this is exactly what I need. Yeah.
But she stood in line for everything, you know, that's just how she is. She's so overwhelmed. Like, we were just at Hobby Lobby earlier today, and she's like looking at everything, and I'm like, okay, what are we here for? And like, I have to focus and redirect her. And so just getting her to be able to advocate for herself. Recently we were at a 504 meeting for her to get her paperwork updated for this coming year in terms of what it is that she needs. And she's now reached the age where she's a part of that 504. She speaks into it. Whereas before, and I haven't been a 5th grade teacher or above. And so I only have known talking to parents. And I hate to use the phrase like talking about the kid, but they're not in the classroom, they're not in the meeting. And so she came into the meeting about halfway through, and then we sat down, you know, we were all sitting there, and she started speaking on behalf of herself. And I couldn't speak because my throat was just closing, was crying so hard inside, because I'm like, I have worked so hard, my husband and I both, and her teachers, every one of her educators, we've worked so hard to teach her how to use the language to advocate for herself. And it's seeing it, and you know, it's happening, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Even the small things like you were talking about earlier with your daughter, just telling her you can do it. Those phrases, those little things the seeds that we plant do so much. And it's just tiny little words that you plant in their mind. And if you repeat them over and over, like, you know, when she's 10 and she's sitting there and she's like, hey, this is this. And you're like, wow, you see the fruit from the tree. And it's something that you're like, okay, wow, maybe I do know what I'm doing.
I love that. You know, I often think about that in myself. And I think in many ways, you know, we want to teach our kids maybe different things that we were taught. We want to, you know, and something that stuck in my head, like my brothers used to tell me I'm stupid, I'm annoying. And I'll often repeat that about myself still. I'll often do it. And when it's mentioned, somebody had mentioned a comment, somebody left like a nasty comment, like, this girl's annoying about my other thing. And I'm just like, man, there it is. You know, and I just think it's so personal, this and this. And I want to make sure that the things that I tell her are just encouraging and wonderful and awesome. And not that I'm like painting over things. Of course, I'm going to be honest with her. But the things that we do tell our kids, like, they do grow into things. And I'm a big fan of, like, when you have this phrase that I always come back to. It's called root to rise. So you have to root yourself deep, and that's the only way you can rise. And it comes with your vegetables, your garden, yourself. When you have deep roots, the deeper you can put your roots in, the sturdier your whole trunk of a tree will be. And you will not waver in certain situations. You will be strong against the wind. You will be strong against people coming in. Like, if you just root yourself, if you are standing sturdy and you have a good foundation, nothing else really matters. A storm can be around you and you will be calm. That was another thing. We've been talking about, like, fluidity and surrendering. I don't know the story from the Bible, but where they're in a storm and God says, just trust me. And he kind of calms it and they make it. And there's a phrase, you know, be the calm in the chaos. And so when things are happening around me, I try to be, you know, so God is our parent, and through him, we are parenting our kids. So we need to make sure that as God is our calm in the chaos, and he's the one that we go to and we seek and we reach out to, we need to be that for our kids. So when she's trying to do things, having a tantrum, she's melting down, and I want to spaz out too and be like, I've had enough. I try to remember that phrase to be like, I need to be her calm in this chaos. So because if I start freaking out, we're literally not going to get anywhere. And so I just need to stay calm and try to get answers. Okay, what is it that we need? And I read somewhere that tantrums aren't emotional oriented, they are goal oriented. And so just because they're crying doesn't mean they're sad. So, okay, so what is your goal? Let's talk about it. Let's Let's talk about, oh, you just want to go over there? We can make it happen. You can do it. I can do it. We can do it together. Like, let's make it happen. Let's make it a party. But, I mean, of course, it's not always like that, but those are the things I try to come back to be like.
Oh, yeah. And in the moment, it's so funny that you say all that. And, you know, like I apologize for my background there. The one word people choose, resolution or whatever. I used to not really, I don't do any of that, but I had written down that I was like, okay, root is my keyword for this year. And so the fact that you say root to rise, I just jotted that down. It's funny that you bring up that calm in the chaos, because I mentioned my daughter and I are a lot alike, and she's the one that riles me up the most. My husband and I don't have, he and I don't have right now, like we're not on the same exact faith path. And so, which is totally fine. I mean, we are navigating our marriage and our family raising and all of that thing so beautifully. And I know that God has definitely put us together for a lot of lessons, and we've learned them along the way. And I will talk to my friends and I'm like, you know, it's so weird that I'm learning so much from my husband, who doesn't have the same belief system that I do. I'm seeing so much of what I need in the way that he parents. And he is my biggest motivator and encourager and reminder of that. So it's like, you know, God's our parent. And sometimes I'm like, okay, God's speaking to me through my husband. Like, in a lot of ways, because he is that calm that I am usually not. And I know a lot of it right now is just chalked up to where I am in my season of life. And
plus pregnancy, you're about to give birth. I mean, that's a lot of
and I've been recently started back going to a counselor just to go through a lot of that stuff, like you were talking about from childhood, some of the things that you carry with you. And I have phrases in my head that I specifically brought up in counseling in, you know, the end of last year, that I'm trying to reconcile a lot of this stuff and heal from it. And it is so, it's all right here on the surface. So when I'm like this and my daughter's like this, my husband is coming and he's like putting that lid on the pot and he's like, okay, let's settle this down. And then I'm reminded, like, oh yeah, okay, well, you're a way better dad than I am. And it's not that he's a better parent. It's just that he has a different perspective right now.
Yeah.
And he's in a different space. And so I'm like, okay, thank you, God, for speaking through him to bring me back to where I need to be. Because I could easily continue down that path and we get nowhere. And like you said, her goal and my goal, like, is my goal to yell louder than her or to get my way? Her goal is to get her way. No one's going to win. So.
Yeah. It's hard to see that. And it's hard. I mean, sometimes my husband will be like, you just, what do you need? Because you need to come down. You're stressing. I do this jaw thing that I clench my jaw really hard and he can see it from a mile away. He will rush over immediately. He's like, what do you need right now? Because this is about to go down. It's about to get crazy. Like, he can recognize it. And it pisses me off because I'm like, you don't know me. And but he's so right.
Yeah. And then that makes you mad because he knows you. And you're like,
yes. Something I heard that I thought was really a cool take to look at things, but it was this girl talking about red flags. And when we have a red flag in front of us, if you picture it facing you, you actually don't see it because it's blowing this way. And so the wind, everything that's coming at you, you see the wind and the storm that's happening, but you don't see the red flag. Whereas the person standing from the side of you, they can see it. They're like, oh, the red flag is out. The wind is blowing. Oh my gosh, we need to address this. I heard it and I was like, whoa.
Yeah, I'm a huge metaphor person. I love that picture.
I love that one. And so then you have to remember to surrender and give trust to your partner, whoever that third party might be, who can actually see it. And you're not wrong. You're just you're standing head on. You're the one leading this whole group. So the red flag's in front of you and you can't see which way the wind is blowing. But this person on the side, they're no way better or worse or anything. They just have a different angle. So they can see it floating and going, and they see that you're, let's say, in danger of this storm that's about to hit. And so this is their way of protecting you and making sure you're going to be all right and taking care of you. And I'm only saying this because this is something I need to remember when it comes up in my life.
I love that. And I'll tell you, the best red flag, like, noticers most recently are teenagers. So when you're there and a decade or so, they are very good at maybe not necessarily like from the perspective of like, hey mom, you're like at a 10 when you did it too. They're going to call you out. They're going to remind you of like, oh, well, this is the lesson you told us. And now here you are living that same thing. You know, you're not doing you're not practicing what you preach. You're not walking the talk. You're just talking. And so much more is caught than taught with these kids as we're raising them, that you're like, oh yeah, okay. So it's God continually humbling you. So not only do I have my husband who can kind of help assess my emotions and all of that, but my teenagers are going to remind me where I'm lacking all the time.
It's just overall in general so hard because there's so many things that we take on. And so I always come back to this metaphor of a backpack, and I want to do a video, but this exercise I like made up in my mind, it's more so for a couple. So I think it's common to like think you're doing everything and your partner isn't, or feel complacent or feel misunderstood. And so this exercise I want to do is you get a bag of potatoes, you get a backpack, and you put like Post-it notes on the potatoes with a rubber band or whatever. And you just say like, okay, these are my responsibilities, whether it's worrying about kids safely, getting dressed for school, making sure we make all of the appointments, making dinner, making sure I am physically okay, take care of it. Like you label all of your potatoes and you put them in the backpack, and then you actually see what you're carrying around, and you trade with your partner to see what it is that they actually are also carrying around that you might not know of. And then it starts this discussion of like, I had no idea that this one thing of starting coffee in the morning was causing you so much stress and anxiety. So how can we take this potato and now share it and carry it together? Can we switch some of these potatoes? Because there's a lot of things that my husband does that I just don't know about. And so I'm thinking, you know, he's got it all figured out. Yet at the same time, he's like, I'm just making sure, you know, all the bills are paid, all the stuff is done. And he's got his own potatoes that he's carrying. But it's important to share about those potatoes, because once your backpack is full and it starts to boil over, okay, which potatoes can we empty out? And same with our feelings and emotions, you know? What is it that we can empty out so then we can take on other responsibilities, other stuff? Again, I'm just saying this because I'm trying to learn this to empty my bag. So I'm not just carrying this heavy stuff. And sometimes late at night when she's finally in bed, I'll physically have to like shrug and breathe, and I lower my shoulders, and I'm like, oh my gosh, my shoulders have been up here because I feel like I'm just carrying all this stuff
constantly.
And then I'm like,
a chalkboard next to my refrigerator where we keep like, I put meals for the week, because my kids will, first question of the teenager boy's mouth is, what's for dinner?
That's my question too. So
I mean, I definitely pregnant, so for sure, what's my next meal? But but it says take a breath. And I wrote it, and I'm like, I wrote it for myself. Like I write all these little reminders for myself, and I have to change. Sometimes I'm like, I have to change the location, or I have to just jot a note down for myself and stick it somewhere where it's unexpected. And then oh yeah, I forgot I wrote that, because it's so easy to forget when it's in the same place all the time. But I love that you said that, like sitting down with your spouse, your significant other, whoever your partner is, and especially as a parent, and just talking about the loads that they carry. Because I feel like for me, being stay-at-home mom in this season of life, I'm like, I'm the keeper of all the things. I know how many rolls of toilet paper we have in the house, and who needs what toothpaste, and you know, this one likes her sandwich cut like a circle, and this one wants it cut like this, and all of these things. And
they all add up.
It's so much physical, like actions, right? My husband, being a very quiet person and also the primary, sole breadwinner in our family, his burdens, I don't see them, because I mean, I know them, but I don't see them. Like you said, the bills being paid, I'm like, how do I pay the mortgage? Like what happens? You know, like, and I always joke to him, I'm like, I can't die. These kids will only candy ravioli for the rest of their lives. You know, like there's just the things that we each carry. And I think that huge piece of recognizing it and seeing what you can swap out, and then also just laying it all out on the table and being like, this is where I'm carrying all this weight. And it makes the communication becomes so much easier. He and I have been married almost 17 years, and about 6-7 years ago, we were ready to be done. We hit a spot where we were, in fact, the day I found out I was pregnant with Jameson, our youngest, was my birthday. It was 35, and like 4 days prior to that, we had kind of discussed like we we're sort of done. And that was one of those hold my beer moments I mentioned earlier. God's like, nope, sorry. And so the years that we've been on the flip side of that have definitely not been perfect, but the amount of growth and humility that we've had in communication has helped. And I think it's also helped as we parent, because we're much more open with our kids about the real stuff, the real hard stuff, because then they see it and they know, hey, it's scary. Mom and dad are angry, but it'll be okay. Like, we will communicate through it. And it's just made us, I think, like I said earlier, with all that loss and grieving and the hard reality of things, it's made us a more cohesive unit. And definitely not perfect. Like, I know it can come across so much like a Instagram post, right? Definitely not perfect, but more real. And I think that's the goal, is just for me as a mom, as a friend, as a wife, and just with God, even just being like more real, being like, hey, this is really hard and I'm not doing it well. And here's where I messed up. And here's where I'll try harder next, tomorrow or the next time or whenever it is. And that's changed a lot. Because when I was a brand new mom, I thought it had to look a certain way. It was before Pinterest even. Like, I'm like that old, okay? And I thought it had to look a certain way. And if it didn't, I was failing. And I love the title of your podcast, because it is your own way. And I think that we get so focused on everybody else's ways that we try to integrate all of it, and we get overwhelmed and we shut down, and we just have to take a step back and say, what is it that I need? What is God telling me through being a mom? And then your children, however many you have, 1, 2, or 112, they're going to integrate their own personalities and the ways that you've taught them, and they're going to become their own people too. And I love that, because I look at the way my brothers and I are, and I'm like, wow, we're totally different people, and we're the same, like the same group of parents. And so it's been definitely the past couple of years have been like a huge awakening for me, and realizing like, okay, I'm not raising children, I'm raising adults, that's the goal. Raise adults, raise them to be good adults. That's my goal.
And that's such a different way of looking at it. I think sometimes when I think of like, raising babies, I'm not saying babies are pets, but sometimes they can be disregarded. Of like, just make sure they're fed, and like, those are the rules they need to follow. Whereas if you see them as like pre-adults, you're just like, oh, well, you have feelings and concerns and a language and things that you like to do, don't like to do. And it's just kind of seeing that. And then before that, I was thinking, as you were talking, the communication and, asking for help and speaking about the things that aren't commonly mentioned is where things can sometimes go wrong. There's this picture I've seen, you might have seen it online, but it's like a cliff, and the wife is hanging up. She's trying to get her husband to pull her up, and he's on the flat part on top, and he's trying to pull her up, but they're not connected. And so she's yelling, why can't you just pull me up? But he can't let go because he's actually holding on to this big tree. And if he lets go, they're both down. And he's saying, why can't you just pull your hand up and then I can pull you up? But what he doesn't see below is there's a cave and there's a snake, and they'll bite her and she'll go down. So they're both dealing with their own obstacles that are causing them not to connect. But because they're not discussing them, they're blaming each other as to why you're not helping or doing your part for us to come up and be safe. And that kind of stuck with me. I'm like, there's so many things that I don't know that I need to mention. That plus, there are so many things that I don't know that my husband does that he doesn't mention. And then you take it into your kids' account. There's so many things that are so important in their life, especially like pre-teenager, teenager, little young adult. There's all these things that are happening that are so important and critical. And if you don't take those into consideration, it's almost like you're ignoring them. And it's not, you almost have to encourage like over communicating, like, okay, so what's the load that you're carrying today? Oh, today I'm really worried that like this paper is due and I need to attend this, and I'm worried about you being late to this, or whatever it is. But then how can you discuss them and say, oh, I'm sorry, you know, I was late picking you up the other day. I'm sorry that's created a worry for you and something now that you carry with you.
Yes.
I will make sure to be more punctual, to be more on time, that you don't have to stress on that part of other things that you have going on.
Yep.
And it's these minimal things that kind of add up that do make our pot overboil over stuff.
Oh, yeah. But I think the over communication, like I giggled inside of that because that's my husband's biggest, like, well, like you talk too much.
Yeah. There's that.
You know, like I don't know if you're a fan of the show The Office, but there's a line from The Office. Yeah, when Kevin's like, why use many words when few words will do?
SeaWorld. You mean SeaWorld?
I might appreciate that shout out too, because she knows we're big Office fans. But yeah, he just is not a man of many words. So it's trying to figure out how to communicate, over communicate within the means of what that person needs. But I think that, recognizing, like you said, if you know that your child is going to be, or your husband is going to be concerned if you're running late, saying, okay, well, here's what I'm going to try to do to remedy this next time so that doesn't happen. Yeah. And just, there's so much to juggle. And I think that the going back to like what we were talking about at the very, very beginning, I think even before we went live, how much, like, it's so much in our face, all the media, the social media, the comparison and all of that. And I think what is happening, at least for me, and I know for my kids and a lot of mom friends that I talk to, is like, we get so distracted by the things that are trying to draw our attention away. And they're trying to literally, like you said earlier, buying our time and our attention. Yeah. And we need to refocus and remember, like, that is knowing who we're raising, knowing the relationships that we have under the roof of our house, and, you know, our small inner circle, and then being better connected to them instead of focusing on, like, oh, well, how they do it. Yeah, but how they do it works for them. Mm-hmm. And it wouldn't work if you came in to my house and tried to raise my kids in the same way. And just like if I came to your house and tried to connect with your daughter, I mean, a biological, you know, all that stuff aside, like, my style is not going to mesh with her in the way that your style wouldn't mesh with my kids. And it's just knowing how to navigate all of that is, I think, the core of so much parenting. But we get so distracted by, like, the shiny and this person looking this way and this person doing it this way and that family doing this. And
it's hard right now. It's so silly because right now in our time, we have so much information that we can seek out and decipher what it is that we want to do and how do we want to do things and, you know, figure that out. But at the same time, it's an overwhelming amount of information. And because a lot of it is through pictures or videos, or, you know, we kind of see it as Hollywood was. So you kind of look up to these people and see it as, you're like, oh, well, you're doing it this way? Like, how, you know, and then you start comparing, and that's when everything starts falling apart, because you're like, well, my kitchen doesn't look like that, or that's not what my kids had for lunch. Oh, that's not, you know, and you start this comparison that really doesn't go anywhere. Yeah. And we're looking outward to be like, well, what are other people doing, versus looking inward and saying, okay, what is my family unit under this roof? What is it that we're doing? What works, what doesn't? But it's just because it's so constantly in front of us. Mm-hmm. It's hard, but you get into this judgment comparison that we shouldn't be in, but we do fall into.
My doctor was calling. They're just reminding me I have an appointment, which I do next week or later this week. I love that you said, like, that looking inward, what works for our family. I saw pictures, you know, around Christmas time. I saw like a meme or something that compared, like, family pictures. It's like the perfect family. And then it shows, like, the behind the scenes. And it's talking about how, like, mom's sweating and dad's complaining and the kids are whining and they're fighting over the clothes and there's dirt and mud and all this stuff. And I'm guilty of it in a lot of ways. I know I am. I try really hard to not always put, like, the picture perfect stuff out there. But of course I also, you know, I like to have, I mean, I'll gladly show you my, you know, like, the messy house. Yeah. But
we like those things too. Like, we like the pretty, like, we put it together. It's a moment to have. We look at it. We're like, that's that day. That was really fun. I love having it. We can put, like, we still should enjoy putting effort into things. Enjoy the beauty of it,
right? Because God wants us to enjoy the beautiful things. I mean, look at all the creations that He's given us. He wants us to enjoy all that. but the behind the scenes stuff. And I think that's where, like, when I share stories, when I write, when I put things, on my Instagram, I might share like a really amazing, like, and I try very hard now, especially having teenage daughters, not to over filter or really filter at all, because whew, like they need reality. Like, this is, like, this
it
is
happens.
reality. There's no, no filtering certain things. But when I put the words behind it, the story behind it, then it makes the picture, you're like, oh, okay, that looks great. But here's the, the whole big messy show that was behind it that led up to that. And not everything is messy, but the reality of it. And I think that that's like getting, one of my women's Bible study, the women's Bible study leader at our church, she always will say, there's more to the story. There's more to the story. There's more to the story. And that has just stuck with me, because there always is. I try to remind myself that. I try to remind my teenager that. Yeah. And she's like, they didn't invite me. I'm like, okay, well, there's more to the story. Maybe, their parents said that you can only have 3, and maybe she's really struggling with why she didn't get to invite you. And we don't know. There could have been a huge fight about who she wanted to. We don't know any of that.
Yeah.
You're focusing on you not getting invited, but we don't know the backstory. And so reminding myself of that is like a daily hour, minute by minute thing.
I love that. And I love that you're writing it and putting it out and sharing your stories. Your daughters can learn from it, and other moms can too. We've it's so silly. So this podcast, we've talked a lot about like navigation and everything. And I'm putting it out today, but I wrote a blog about just motherhood being like a river, and you're just kind of flowing, and you have to keep it going, and you go around these banks and around the stuff, and at the same time you're providing this energy to the forest, to the animals, to the fish that might be around you. And if you don't actually rivers, if they don't run into an ocean or anything, they will dry out. It'll be the end of that river. Yep. And that's how I see this motherhood community, your mom Bible study group, where you are as a river flowing into this ocean of other moms that replenishes your energy, gives you more power, so then you can now as a mom provide to your kids and others around you and keep this life flowing, which is so important. And it's just silly, because the more you talk about it, how you are giving your energy to the kids, and then these moms are giving this advice, and it's all sharing, and it's just beautiful. It's just beautiful kind of seeing how it all connects. And of course, God is, I've talked about this at a different podcast, but I said The Office, and I picture life as The Office, and God is just watching life as The Office. And we do these little interviews of like, well, this is how this happened, and this is how this happened. Yeah. And we're all in this like comedy that he's observing. Yeah. And it's just funny. And, he's laughing. He's like, oh, I gave him ideas about these things, and now they're sharing them, and they think it's coincidental, but he he wrote it all in the script, and he had it planned out, and we're just the actors in it acting it out. It's just so silly to see how it all comes together.
I know. I always love the metaphor of like the back of it. We see the back of the tapestry, right? All the strings, all the craziness, all the different colors, all the different knots. It doesn't seem to make sense. And he's looking above and going, wow, look at this beautiful creation that I've made. And we look at it and we're like, this is a hot mess. Like, are you kidding me?
I love that.
This person is my neighbor, or this person to run carpool with, or, whoever it is. But I love what you were saying about that momming, like a river, because like I've often told some of my preschoolers friends, like, I'm the old mom, you don't want to hear from me. Like, I'm 40, I have like a bunch of kids, 3/4 of my kids are shaving. Why am I still in with preschoolers? Like, I don't need to be, not that I don't need to be in the group, but it's funny because the moms group that I'm a part of, they're like, no wisdom. And more often than not, I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. I don't have that much to offer. And I even told Savannah that on Friday. I'm like, I'm not going to have anything to talk about. She's like, whatever. But more often than not, like, I go into it, I don't walk in thinking I'm going to teach them something, because one of my biggest mom pet peeves is to say to another mom, you just wait until. Because you know what? God's going to say that to you. You just, like, your daughter overfilled the water thing. Oh, okay. You just wait until you do it later on today.
God is funny. That's what I'm telling you. God is really funny. He's number one comic, and he's really funny. Yep. You just got to see the comedy.
I love that, because most often when I leave a conversation with a mom who has like your age and your age children, I always, I'm like, wow, oh my gosh. Like, I love listening to you share stories and what you're learning as a mom with a 1-year-old, that I'm like, oh man, if I knew that when I had a 1-year-old. And so like, I learned so much more from a mom who has far less years experience. Doesn't mean anything to me. Like, the years of experience that you have, I just have a bigger book. But yours might be richer, you know?
It's just different. That's back to this name of the podcast and this whole story, is that like, I look so forward to learning from other moms, just hearing the stories, hearing the experience, because there's so much that I haven't experienced. And my experience is different. All of ours is going to be so different. The backpacks that we carry hold different things. And it's so silly. I'm friends with Savannah and Alicia, and they're like, our babies are pretty much at the same time. We're like weeks apart. And they're so different. The way we do things is so different. They've helped me a lot. Like, we've had this mom group started, and they actually encouraged me to start the podcast, but it's been the three of us just kind of sharing our experiences, and we do things so differently.
But the goal, what's the goal? You're raising your children to be happy, healthy,
happy and
fed,
safe. Yeah.
And safe, right?
That's all that matters.
I think when we boil it down to the number one goal is just getting them through and getting us through, and just, you don't want to say keeping your blinders on, but like, I mean, going back to like Bible verse, like, run your race, like, don't look left and right, run your race, and God put you on that path. Your child was made for you, just like my friend shared with me the other day. She was made for you, and I'm like, no, she was actually. I mean, it's like, I don't know, really. And it's not to be like, I'm not grateful, but it's those. She said it on a day when I felt like least deserving to be her mom, you know, and that's what I think that we just need to remind ourselves, like, on your worst day, they were made for you. Like, there's there's a reason, and the whole picture of it, I think, has just been giving one another grace as moms instead of comparison, and giving ourselves the biggest dose of grace, because we put so much pressure on ourselves.
It's so internal, and it's sometimes we feel like it's pressure from other people, but honestly we're the ones creating it and trying to drive it. Sometimes I think of like, God usually, you know, in the Bible you read, God helps those who are at their lowest. So sometimes when I feel like, oh my gosh, you know, I've had enough. Happened the other day, I was like, I'm just overwhelmed. I've had enough. And then my daughter just started giving kisses to things a month ago, but she would like kiss the book, kiss the thing, kiss the stuff, but wouldn't give me a kiss. I'm like, okay, whatever. And then I was having this day, and I was just like, I don't know what to do. And then she gave me a kiss. And I was done. I was like, that's it.
That's it. That's all you need. Yeah.
Forget anything I've ever said. Forget anything I've ever said. My daughter gave me a kiss. Like, can you even imagine anything better than that?
Yeah.
And last night during bath, I was thinking, you know, like, kids are closest to God. They are pure, innocent, and and if our goal in life is to serve God, a way we can do that is by serving our children. So what are those things that we need to do? We need to humble ourselves. We need to make sure we are present. We need to serve them. Not serving them breakfast in bed, but serve them in a godly way where we can help them grow, develop, and, like your daughter, be able to speak for herself, be able to stand strong and say, hey, here's my 2 cents, 5 cents, 10 cents.
She is the one, when you said children are closest to God, she said to me, we were driving home from Taekwondo last week, I guess. And she said to me, do you think what we're having? Twins. They're very excited. That's conversation is all about the twins, right? She's trying to like let me slip the names or whatever.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I don't know. I said, but your sister Jameson really wants a boy and a girl. And she's like, Mom, she knows. She knows, because children always know. And I was like, oh, and I was thinking about it. She reminded me the week that I took my pregnancy test in July, I was like, okay, sure, God, like, because like I told you, I had miscarriage. I'm like, sure, in my head, I'm like, this isn't going to pan out. I didn't want to get my hopes up.
Yeah.
And I also was like, not sure, because I'm 40. And honestly, like the next day I took the test, and then the next day my daughter was drawing a picture with my husband, my 4-year-old, and she drew a rainbow. And it was funny because she drew it backwards, like the blue, the purple, blue, you know, and oranges at the bottom, no red. Yeah. She drew this rainbow, and she walked over out of the blue, and she just gave it to me. And I was like, wow. Huh, okay. That's kind of funny, right? And it's like I hung it on the fridge. And then as like the pregnancy progressed and you know, I have moved it since into my planner, because after the babies are born, I have all my kids' names like tattooed.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
I can't
there it is. Yeah.
Figure out. They're on my arm. But I'm going to add my twins' names, and I'm going to add that rainbow onto the arm, you know, underneath their names. And I'm like, it's just strange. Like I remember, and Reagan said to me the other day in the car, she's like, do you remember she gave you the rainbow the week you knew you were pregnant? And I'm like, who? Like, and although she didn't know, I think that, like you said, children are closest to God. And I'm like, yeah, there's just something about that, you know?
They're God's vehicle. As we are God's vehicle to teach our kids, God uses them to teach us those lessons. It's just seeing those things. Yeah. Erin, I have to cut this off because I have to get to my baby.
I was just like, I know you have a little one. You have to
But I'd love to have you on again to do like an update. So maybe like a few weeks after you feel ready, after the twins have been born. Then we want to know the gender. Yes, when it's gender, names. We want to see how I'd love to hear just like how your time management, mom management's going. How's your backpack? Is it full? Is it empty? You know, I want to know all about it. So I'd love to have another if you want to hop on again and just see where you're at. Okay, awesome.
I would for sure love to update you, because, you know, we're hoping that in the next couple of weeks we get to meet them. I just want to hear their cries. My husband doesn't say that at 3:30 in the morning. We'll see how true that is.
Well, that'll be so cool, because then we're going to look back on this and be like, okay, so what are the things that we thought were going to be? Yes. What came, you know, it's going to be really interesting too.
And God will be up there like, here, pull me a beer.
Yeah. You know? I'm telling you, God's funny. Okay. Thank you so much, Erin. Thank you for joining me. What a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been awesome. I loved it. I even had like my little, felt like I was at a coffee shop. So.
Yay! I need to get a different mug, because mine's like for tailgating and like you can open beer bottles.
Well, I think you need like a little, like you're at the point now where you can maybe put your brand on it.
Yes, I need my little mug, and then I can send it to my mom's and we can just like have a little coffee date. Oh, okay, I'd love that. Okay, thank you, Erin. I hope you have a great week, and I look forward to talking to you and catching up again soon.
Sounds great. Sounds good. I'll see you. Bye-bye.
All right, bye. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and I'll see you next time at Mom Your Own Way. Bye.